There's a different kind of loneliness that happens in a room full of people who remember you, but just not first. See, you're not left out entirely. You get the text eventually, and you're invited, but not until others say no. I mean, you're in the room, but not in the heart of it. And while everyone swears that you're welcome, you just can't help but feel like you're a shadow of someone they hoped would show up instead. This is the pain of being an afterthought. Not fully excluded, you're just never quite chosen. It's a subtle kind of a hurt, isn't it? It's not sharp enough that you scream, but it's dull enough just to sink in deep enough. Like a stone in your stomach that never really leaves. And you tell yourself it's not personal, that people are busy, that maybe they just didn't think of you this time. But this time seems to turn into every time. And then suddenly you're rehearsing what you'll say when they finally call, just to sound grateful instead of hollow. This isn't just about birthday invites or Friday night plans, is it? It's more about the proximity without priority. It's about being known, but not kept. Appreciated, but not really anchored to. You're visible, but you're not vital. And the damage isn't in the occasional oversight. It's in the consistent patterns. It's that low-grade disconnection that starts to shape the way you see yourself. Not as someone unworthy, as much as someone who's always almost. You're almost chosen. You're almost enough. You're almost home. Here at Bintegers, I want to name this kind of pain because I think it thrives in silence. I believe that we can build a life where integrity means that you're not just pretending that you're fine when you're not, and where intimacy also means that you're being fully seen, not just situationally appreciated. See, I'm not here to teach you how to beg louder. I'm not here to remind you that belonging isn't something that you earn by shrinking yourself. It's something that you cultivate by living from your whole truth. And this really starts with telling the truth about the pain. See, the people who feel like an afterthought, these are the people who often become masters of adaptation. I mean, they learn how to show up late to their own emotions, and they can start buffering disappointment before it ever really lands. And these are the people who become fluent in being fine, right? But underneath that veneer, that practice grace, is this heavy kind of a grief. The grief of knowing what it's like to be everyone's second choice. Not because they're unlovable, but more so because people never truly saw them. And the truth is, many communities confuse friendliness with connection. They'll say, you're welcome here, but they'll never ask what makes you feel safe. They'll include you in the group photo perhaps, but not as much in the group chat. And they may call you when they need a backup plan, but not when they just want to be with you. And if you say nothing, they'll most likely assume that you're okay with this. And the reality is you're not. You've just gotten tired of feeling like you're too much or too needy or too inconvenient. And here's the thing I want you to reflect on. Being the afterthought does not mean that you're unworthy. It just means that they've never been taught how to hold people like you. Because people who listen deeply, who notice what goes unsaid, who show up with their full hearts, they unsettle the casualness of modern connection, right? And most people have not learned how to sit still in that kind of a presence. So instead of drawing closer, they'll circle around it. They'll keep you near enough just so you can feel included, but far enough not to feel convicted. But proximity is not intimacy, and availability is not belonging. See, you can't build safety on scraps, and you really shouldn't have to. You've likely spent years learning how to accept crumbs without making a scene of it, right? But what if the next scene that you write isn't about acceptance as much as it is about assertion? What if the story changes not when they invite you in, but when you stop waiting to be invited in the first place? This is not a call to walk away from everyone. It's more so a call to walk back toward yourself, to stop mistaking tolerance for love, to stop translating "you're welcome to join" as "you're wanted here," to stop dancing around the truth that really is burning in your chest every time the plans are made without you. See, you deserve more than being remembered as a backup. You deserve to be someone's first thought. Sometimes I think we stay in these half-connected spaces because at the heart of it, we're just afraid of being alone. But loneliness does not just come from solitude. It often hides inside our closest of circles, right? And you can be at the party and still feel like you're an outsider. You can be in the conversation and still feel like you're more the background noise. You can be listed in the group text while still feeling like you're a ghost. And you tell yourself not to make a big deal out of this, right? You tell yourself, at least I'm here, but here isn't the same thing as feeling held. And so this starts eating at you in small ways, where you second guess whether you should reach out again for the first time, being the first one engaging, I mean, or you hesitate before sharing your excitement or your pain because you're not sure if they're gonna want to meet you there. And you scroll through your contacts, looking for someone that you can call, and then you realize that there's no one that you trust to pick up without needing an excuse. So instead of calling, you close a tab and you close the loop and you just keep it to yourself. And you don't talk enough about how many people feel peripheral because they're considered dramatic or demanding, or maybe because they're just intuitive. So these are the people who notice the shifts. They feel when the energy changes in the room. They can sense when a connection is performative. And I don't think they're overthinking. They're just picking up on what others are refusing to say out loud. And that sensitivity becomes both a gift and a burden. But here's a quiet truth I'd want to name now. The people most attuned to belonging are most often the ones who are starving for it. This is not because they're flawed, but more so because they're relationally fluent in a world that's emotionally illiterate. See, they're wired to notice and to reflect and to connect. But in a society that prioritizes speed and convenience and surface, and these are qualities that are often seen as extra or too intense or just too much. And so they learn to mute themselves just enough to stay included, even if it means that they're never being fully seen. So let me see if I can say this plainly. You don't have to be loud to deserve a place. You don't have to be everyone's favorite to be worth keeping. You don't have to overfunction or overshare or overextend yourself just so that you can earn connection. You just have to be real. And I think that's the hardest part. Because when your realness has been met with silence or distance, it's then that you start to believe that it's safer to just keep it hidden. But hiding doesn't create belonging, does it? It just creates proximity without presence. See, here at Uber Bintegers, I want to rewrite the script. I believe that integrity means honoring the truth of our emotional experience, even if it makes others feel uncomfortable. And intimacy, for me, means moving toward the kind of connection that can actually hold that truth without flinching. This is the work, not just being liked, but truly being known. Not just being invited, but actually being claimed. So how do we start reclaiming our seat at the table? Well, a good place to start is by naming the dynamic. Without apology, without any self-blame. See, you're not expecting too much for noticing who shows up and who doesn't. And you're not being dramatic for wanting to feel wanted. You're not difficult for saying, I want to matter. These are not unreasonable desires. These are human desires and worthy of being legitimized. And when we've grown used to being on the sidelines, even the idea of taking up space feels like a risk. So here's the shift in perspective that I want to present. You're not on the outside because you're hard to love. I think you're on the outside because they never learned how to hold someone who loves like you do. Let that sink in. You were never the problem. You were just too real for the rooms that only knew how to celebrate masks. And you've spent too long making yourself small to fit their comfort zones. So what if you stopped editing yourself to stay palatable? What if you stopped waiting to be picked and instead started practicing being planted? What if you chose to center yourself in spaces where your presence does not need any proof? This is not about arrogance. It's more so about anchoring yourself, anchoring into your value, anchoring into the kind of relationships where you're not just remembered when it's convenient, right? But instead you're cherished without any conditions. This work is slow. It's uncomfortable, but it's sacred. It's this journey of choosing substance over scraps, of saying no to invitations that feel like pity, and saying yes to steady cultivation of true belonging, not just in community, but also in your own heart. Because the first call that you should be making is to yourself. And when you stop being like your own afterthought, it's then that you'll start to see who's been treating you like an afterthought as well. There's a grief that creeps in slowly when you've spent too long convincing yourself that half love is better than no love. And when the people around you don't make space for the full weight of you and who you are, you begin to whittle yourself down just enough so that you can stay convenient. This is a process where you master the art of low maintenance. You keep your needs quiet. You keep your desires vague, and your expectations, you keep them extremely low. Not because that's who you are, but that's because you're afraid of what might happen if you're honest about how much you actually long for these legitimate desires. And yet the pain does not go away. It more so it intensifies, because underneath the gratitude for being included is a deeper truth. That is, you're tired of being a courtesy. You want to be someone's priority, not just when it's easy, not just when they're lonely, not just when they're down to their last option. You want to be chosen when they're when they're at their best, not just when they're at their most bored zone. And maybe that feels terrifying to admit, because what if they're not capable of that kind of depth? What if they really are only available for convenience instead of true, rooted, deep connection? Then you're left with this painful decision, one that so many sensitive and intuitive and high integrity people face. And that is, do I stay in the lukewarm spaces because they're familiar? Or do I leave them and risk being alone with my fullness on display? That's not an easy question, but it's a necessary question. See, most people don't realize that being the strong one, or the chill one, or the reliable one comes at a cost. And the cost is that you become the person that everyone leans on, but that no one checks in on. And you're the one, for example, who's holding the space, and no one is holding that space for you. And when you finally do express frustration, well, it's often met with surprise or guilt or defensiveness, because they never notice the imbalance. They only notice the benefits of your availability. But the cost of being constantly available for others without being met with reciprocity is really just a quiet and emotional erosion. And here's again another perspective that I want you to consider. You cannot build something, you cannot keep building something like community on the backs of people who are silently starving. You are the one who's always reaching out and always remembering and always adjusting and rarely being mirrored back. This is not connection. This is containment. And you deserve far more than to be contained. So, how do you start stepping out of that dynamic and into this new one? First, stop making excuses for being overlooked. That doesn't mean jumping to blame or bitterness. It just means you're willing to tell the truth without buffering it and saying, oh, they probably didn't mean to do that, or maybe I'm just too sensitive. See, if you always end up last on the list, that's a pattern, not a coincidence. And you're allowed to name it. Second, check your internal scorecard. See, many of us, I think, unconsciously keep tabs. How often do we reach out? Who initiates? Who includes us? And over time, it forms data points or sets that quietly inform our worth. But when that worth is tied to others' attentiveness, we're building our foundation on a very faulty line. I mean, what would it look like to build that foundation within yourself instead of externally? To ask, where am I showing up for me, right? Or what parts of me am I neglecting while I'm waiting to be noticed? What energy am I extending to others that I am refusing to extend to myself? Again, here at Uber Bintegers, I return over and over again to this principle, and that is integrity means being honest with yourself about where it is that you're starving. And intimacy begins when you offer yourself the care that you've been outsourcing to others. And you're not doing this because you're cutting everyone off, but more so because you're reclaiming the energy that's been scattered across people who've never been equipped to hold it in the first place. I think this is beautiful, beautiful, scary work. It's the opposite of cynicism. It's the rebuilding of trust within our own soul. And if we zoom out for a moment, This isn't just personal, it's, I think, cultural. See, we live in a world where fast, shallow, performative connection is normalized, where people use community as a buzzword, but rarely do they slow down enough to build relationships that actually nourish. And so, I think we've become skilled at proximity, but we're more malnourished in presence. We're trained to keep people close, but not always to keep them deep. And that's where people like you, those who notice and who care deeply and who remember the weight of silence, that's where we often find ourselves as misfits. Not because we're broken, but because we're built for something that this culture didn't really prioritize in the first place. And so the grief of being the afterthought is not just about not being invited sooner. It's about living in a world that doesn't know how to truly invite people in the first place, if at all. But that doesn't mean that we can't change this, does it? I think this starts with naming the pain and then choosing to live in a way that honors that pain, to move slowly and to build deeply and to extend ourselves what we have been waiting for others to offer us in the first place, offering that to ourselves. Because the work ahead of us is not just to be included, it's more so to be anchored. And that begins with us. So let's talk about this decision that no one really wants to make. And that's the one where we dance around with distractions and justifications and emotional bargaining. See what happens when we realize that we've outgrown the rooms that we kept shrinking ourselves to fit in? Here's what happens. There's most likely grief, because even if those rooms were never warm, even if the invitation was always just an afterthought, there's still loss in the midst of that, right? Because maybe those people were part of our story. Maybe they were better than nothing. Maybe they were all that we had at one point in time. But better than nothing is no longer enough to fulfill our soul's desires. See, we're ready for far more, aren't we? And this is where so many of us are tempted to stall, right on this edge of transformation, right before we take that leap. See, we know we can't keep doing the emotional gymnastics that we've been doing. We know that we can't keep justifying neglect with, oh, they're busy. We know that we're tired of calling it love when really it's just obligation. And we're most likely afraid that if we walk away from what's almost love, we may never find the real thing. Afraid that if we stop accepting scraps, then we may starve. But consider this. Starving on our own terms is still more sacred than feasting in rooms where we're invisible. Because what you lose in numbers, you'll most likely gain in alignment. And what you lose in noise, I think you'll gain in clarity. And what you lose with convenience, you gain in dignity. So how do we move forward? Well, not with bitterness or blame, but with boundaries. And boundaries does not mean we're closing our hearts. It means that we're choosing rooms that are built with doors wide enough to welcome our whole self into that room. Not just the self that's performative, but the self that gives. The self that does not make it easy for others. The self that is allowed to want and to feel and to need and to matter. It means saying things like, I'm no longer entertaining invitations that only arrive when the guest list has already been set and there's only room at the end. Or I'm no longer making myself convenient for people who don't know how to be consistent with me. or I'm no longer measuring my worth by how quickly someone replies. See, you don't have to get louder to be heard. You just have to be clearer about whose worth is whispering to you. Because the people who are meant for you, they'll listen even when your voice is trembling. Here at Uber Bintegers, I'm not building empires. I'm building echoes, places where the sound of your truth does not disappear into the silence, but instead reverberates with resonance. I believe that integrity means knowing when to stop calling what hurts home. And that intimacy isn't just about being known, it's about being claimed. Not reluctantly and not eventually, but freely and fully and now. So, what does this look like in practice? In practice, it might mean calling less and reaching out less, not to punish, but to notice. Who notices your absence? Who mirrors your presence? Who offers without needing prompting? It might mean that you're cultivating new spaces or slower spaces, ones that may feel awkward at first, but they feel real. It might mean that you're choosing depth over frequency or stillness over hustle. And above all, you're choosing truth over tolerance. So here's what connection I think could mean. It means not just being invited, it actually means being anticipated. Not just being included, but actually being considered. And not just being called, but actually being counted on. And if you've never experienced that, it's not because you're unworthy. It's because you've been orbiting rooms where the convenience factor was prioritized over care. And now you're learning to leave. This episode was never really a goodbye letter. It was more of a declaration that your presence is not a backup plan, that your vulnerability, your tenderness, your softness is not a liability, and that your desire to be remembered without reminders is not excessive. It's actually essential. See, you're not asking for too much. You're asking for what the world has forgotten how to offer in the first place. And that's this deliberate, rooted, reverent kind of a connection. So walk away if you need to. Let them misunderstand you and let the silence echo. Because what's waiting on the other side of that silence is the kind of belonging that you've always known was possible. It's the kind that doesn't require you to have to earn it. It's the kind that doesn't forget that you matter and that you exist. The kind that never arrives late. And until those people find you, you be that person for yourself. Call yourself first. Check in on yourself. Respond. Celebrate yourself. Choose yourself in full view. Because when you become your own first call, you in essence stop needing to beg others to remember your name. And from that grounded place, you'll stop chasing the rooms that were never meant to hold your space, or that required you to shrink yourself to be in them. See, you were never the afterthought. You were just waiting to come home to yourself. I hope this episode has spoken to you. Let me know how it landed for you down in the comments below. I'll see you in the next episode.